You know, as Colin Tivy said earlier, there's nothing wrong with sharing as long as it results in a better product. All right, let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Brad, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm all for shared parts, and certainly in my repair shop, shared parts really helps me out, because if I put a part into inventory and it could conceivably fit more than one car or more than one engine, that really helps me out. If everything was unique, boy, you'd have to have 3 times the inventory that you have today to repair cars. Here's probably the classic example of all time of an engine that shares a lot of parts with another engine. This is a 4.3 GM V6 engine, and this engine shares a lot of its valve train components with a 5-liter and a 5.7-liter V8 engine. Matter of fact, when they made this 4.3, it was essentially a 5.7 V8 with 2 cylinders lopped off the block and shortened up to a V6. The same lifters, push rods, rocker arms, valve springs, valves, same front timing cover, timing chain and sprockets, crank seal were all the same on the V6 as they were on the V8. Now when we talk about engine layout, the push rods are one area and the cam layout of the engine is one key difference in the engines in many of today's vehicles. So let's have a look at this push rod V6 and show you the key differences between this and an overhead cam engine. Our cutaway engine is a pushrod engine, and when we look down inside the heart of this engine, we can see the valve train layout, and this is where the key difference is between a pushrod and an overhead cam engine. On this pushrod engine, when I turn the crank, you can see the camshaft turning down in there, and you can see one lobe of the cam coming by and actuating this valve lifter. Here's the pushrods in the engine, and this is how we get the name pushrod engine. The pushrods actuate the valves via these rocker arms, and as their name implies, the rocker arms rock back and forth to actuate the valves. This makes for a rather compact engine design and a rather compact cylinder head because the camshaft is down in the block and not up in the head. Now over here we've got a cylinder head off a single overhead cam engine. This happens to be a 2.2 liter Chrysler 4-cylinder, and as the name implies, single overhead cam, you can see a single overhead camshaft right here. There's the cam lobes that are operating the valves via these rocker arms. The lobe comes around, presses the rocker arm down, presses the valve spring and valve down to open or actuate the valve. On the single overhead cam engine, all the valves are in line, as you can see, and when I tilt the cylinder head up, we can see in the combustion chambers, this is a 2 valve per cylinder design. We can see an intake valve that's open right here. The cam lobe is pressing this valve open. If we go to the next combustion chamber, we can see an exhaust valve that's off its seat right here. I'll lay this head back down and we'll go to the next one. This is a double overhead cam head off a Ford Mystique or Contour, and as the name implies here, the camshafts are dual. We've got one cam here operating all our exhaust valves and one cam operating our intake valves. Again, camshafts are in the head, makes for a little bit bulkier cylinder head. When I tilt this one up, we can see that it's a 4 valve per cylinder design. There's our 2 exhaust valves and 2 intake valves per combustion chamber. That hole is for the spark plug right there. Now just to summarize, the pushrod engine is great for a big displacement, low RPM engine, very low maintenance, so it works well in full-size cars, pickups, and vans where the RPM is typically low. The overhead cam engines are good for small engines that have to turn high RPM to make their power. The double overhead cam, even higher RPM. When you talk about racing, for example, NASCAR Winston Cup cars are all pushrod V8s. They're limited to about 9,000 RPM, even when using some rather expensive lightweight valve train components. 9,000 RPM is roughly their limit. Now, when you talk about Indy cars, they're all double overhead cam engines, and they turn 13 or 14,000 RPM. Formula One cars, 16 or 17,000 RPM in some of those double overhead cam engines. They're talking about next year having engines as high as 20,000 RPM. It's hard to believe, but in any case, the pushrod engine, because of all the reciprocating mass in the valve train, can't turn really high RPM. It's got to be bigger displacement to make its power. The double overhead cam engines, smaller displacement, higher RPM, different type of a power band. I'd like to thank the guys at Oakville Automotive, Bob and Frank, for loaning me these 2 cylinder heads today. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2002.
So here's the question. Where were you 32 years ago? I know some of you weren't even a glint in your father's eye. As for me, well, I was in diapers but found time to get Motoring TV off the ground. And today I like to think we've got one of the best automotive video libraries in the world. If you agree, please give us the thumbs up and also subscribe. We'd really appreciate it.